Hello, this is Vic Hyland and welcome to the Grade 1 of the RGT exam for electric guitar. We'll start off with some tuning notes. This guitar has obviously been tuned to an electronic tuner. So it's the E. Okay, we'll crack on straight away. The series of sections in this book worked along with the exam sections, same as the other grades. So if you've done the preliminary one already, we run through the same 6 sections, which would be scales, chords, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, spoken tests, and oral tests. So we'll start off with the scales. The first 3 scales in the book, E natural minor, E blues, and G pentatonic major. Each of these are in 2 octaves, and because they're set at the bottom of the guitar, there are a number of open strings. Just a word of advice about which fingers to use. It's a good idea to use a logical series of fingering. Don't use one finger to cover all the notes, because your hand will be moving up and down the fretboard, and technically it's not a good idea, because as we progress up the grades, we'd have to make sure that we learnt how to use all our fingers anyway. So any finger pattern that would be logical is okay. So for instance, if we look at the E natural minor scale, the first 3 notes, we got the open, then the second, then the third. I've just played that with my first finger on the 2nd fret and my 2nd finger on the 3rd, but I could have equally have gone 2nd finger on the 2nd fret, 3rd finger on the 3rd fret. Okay, so any pattern that makes sense. So here we go. I'll just play through the scale for you. Now, when you're learning these, look for patterns. In this particular scale, we've got half of the scale, which is 023, and the same on the next string, and then 024. So what I would do is suggest that you would either practice the 6th string and the 5th string, nice and slowly, and making sure you're using the correct fingers, and then build it into the next pattern. So the next 2 strings. And then put them together. And then finish it off. And then put the whole lot. What I would suggest also is if you learn the ascending part of the scale first, and then learn the descending part of the scale in the same manner that we did. So you do that in sections as well. And perhaps do the ascending part, descending, and then build that into it. Okay, so obviously I'm playing these at a speed that is probably a little bit too quick for the grade. So keep it sort of steady. The scale needs to be clear. It needs to be even, and it needs to be accurate. But all of those elements are as important as one another. So don't play a scale where you go because that isn't clear. Sorry, that isn't even. And if you're playing that's not very clear either, as well as being uneven. So clarity. And evenness. It's very important. When you get to the top of the scale, you've got to come straight back down and don't repeat the top note. So you imagine it's like the top of a pyramid. So taking it from the top part of the scale. Straight back down. Let's just move on to the E blues. Okay, in this instance I was using my third finger on the 3rd fret on the 6th string, on the E string, and then it's O, 1, 2 as the fingering on string 5, the A string. And then on string 3 it's O, 2, 3, then O, 3 on string 2, and then O at the top. Okay, let's just play that scale one more time. And then the last one on that page is the G pentatonic major scale. Nice little pattern here. After you get the starting note, which of course is a G, that's an interesting point, of course. Each of those scales actually starts on the letter name of the scale. So the previous two scales starting on the open E. This scale is a G pentatonic major scale, and that starts on the G note on string 6 on the E, okay? Once you've played that note, the next 3 strings have got the same pattern of frets. So it's O, 2, same on the next, same on the next. Then it goes to O, 3 for 2 of those. So play that. Okay, one more time. Good. Now, over the page, we've got the A major scale and the A pentatonic minor scale. Now, first of all, if we look at the A pentatonic minor, which is the last one in the list, because it's slightly easier to explain, and we'll go back and have a look at the A major one in detail. Right, so the fingers for the pentatonic minor, if we start with your first finger, at the 5th fret, and then the little finger on the 8th, you'll see that's the logical fingers to use. And then we have a nice little pattern once more on this one, which goes 5, 7, right the way across. And then when you get onto the 2nd string, it becomes 5, 8, and then 5. Okay, now what I would tend to do with this one is I'd think of it in finger numbers. Because if you're using a really logical set of fingers, you can actually just learn the finger pattern. So we're going finger 1, 4, then 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1. Now, I encourage people to sort of look at these little patterns, like the pattern where you're going fret 5, fret 7. And it goes across 3 strings, and just do that as an exercise. It's good for building up speed and sort of muscle tone, I suppose, in your hands. And obviously that'll be good when we get to lead playing. Okay, you can actually start to get some interesting phrases with those little patterns. Right, so that's the pentatonic minor. Okay. Now the 2 A scales in this grade are what we call transpositional scales. We can actually play them in different keys by just moving them. But you're not expected to do that in grade 1. You're just learning those patterns in A. But they are going to become very important scales for you as we go up the grades. Right, let's have a look at the A major scale now, because this is probably the hardest one to play in this grade. Now, I would suggest that you start with your 2nd finger on the A note, because you'll find that if you do this, the notes of the scale will fall directly under your fingers. If you use any other finger combination, you're going to end up having to move your hand. So starting with the 2nd finger on the 5th fret, then use your little finger on the 7th. And I would just practice that. Take care when you're playing your scales not to lift off the previous finger, because you don't need to. So on this particular string, I've now got 2 fingers sitting on the string. I didn't need to take my second finger off because it doesn't affect the pitch of the note. Go on to the next string. We're going to use our first finger, second finger, and fourth. So in this case, we'd end up with 3 fingers on the string, okay? It just tidies up your technique. So once we've got that little pattern, if we're thinking finger numbers again, finger 2, finger 4, 1, 2, 4. The next 2 strings, that's strings 4 and 3, the D and the G, we've got finger 1, 3, 4, and we get that on both strings. Now as you're doing this, listen carefully to what the scale sounds like, feel it in your fingers, sort of be aware of what that feels like, because you're logging then a sort of a tactile, or what we call kinesthetic, series of bits of information in the mind. And also look at the pattern. And if you say the name of the fingers, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, that helps as well. So we're layering information. Now, all this stuff about these practicing techniques that I'm showing you are also available in a book called The Art of Practice, which is available from me through my website, and I'll give you the details at the end. And also there's a link from my site to the RGT, and also from the RGT back to me as well. But anyway, let's press on. On string 2, the B string, we're almost like we're back to the original finger pattern. So finger 2, finger 4, and then finger 1, finger 2 to finish on the first string. So that gives us this scale. So you can see, if you've followed my advice about the fingers, it makes sense technically, and that makes it nice and easy to do things like hammer-ons and stuff later on. Okay, good. So that's the scales. Let's press on to the chords. Now, for those of you who did the preliminary grade, a lot of the chords for grade 1 are the same. We've just got an additional set of chords. The major 7s and a D7 chord and an A major chord. So I'm just going to run through each chord and say the name and a little bit about practicing the chords and some sort of practicing ideas and techniques when we've mastered the actual shapes. So A major, C major, D major, E major, G major. Also remember that these chords can be referred to just by the letter name, so A, C, D, E and G. Okay, we'd refer to the majors. Now the minors. And that was A minor. D minor. Notice I'm playing the correct number of strings that are indicated in the book. So the D minor one only had four strings, whereas the next one, the E minor, has all 6. Then on to the A7. The B7, the D7, and the E7. Now they're referred to as dominant 7th chords. These are sort of strange chords actually. I'll explain a little bit about the name of the chord and how it works. You see, if you were playing a dominant 7th chord like A7, you wouldn't play an A major scale over the top of A7 because it doesn't fit. The reason for that is A7 is not in the key of A major. A7 is actually from the key of D. And in classical music, they would have referred to that chord as the dominant seventh in the key of D major. Now, with the system of labelling that we do, we sort of refer back to the major scale all the time. So if you look at the code, if you like, the formula in the book, if you look at where, say, for instance, there's the A7 written in the middle of the page, underneath there's a series of letters which tells you which notes make up the chord of A7. And underneath that, you've got a series of numbers, and it goes 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Now, that means to say that the 1, 3, 5 and the flat 7 relate back to the major scale. So 1 and 3 and 5 are exactly the same as it would be in the key of A, but the flat 7 is an alteration of the scale. Now, that word dominant then comes from a classical term. And we don't tend to use many of the other classical terms. Such as the tonic, we tend to use that maybe, but we don't tend to use the submedian and so on. But that comes from classical harmony. So the dominant seventh actually gives us the difference between this type of chord and the next set of chords, which are completely new to us in grade 1. These are the major seventh chords. Now, these possibly do come from the key. That, say, for instance, A major 7 probably does come from A major. So if you played an A major 7 chord and somebody was playing lead, you could play the A major scale over it because it would fit. Okay? So anyway, here's these chords. Here's A major 7, C major 7, and D major 7. Now, these three chords then are very different from the dominant seventh, so be very careful to make sure that you don't confuse A major 7 and A7. They're totally different chords, okay? Very important to do that, because if you're playing a chord sequence and there's supposed to be an A major 7 chord in it and you play an A7, it will sound wrong. Okay, so a couple of ideas about the practicing of these chords. You could... One of the systems I've used before and explained on the previous set of grades was to use like a paper system to sort of randomise the information, because one of the problems we have when we learn is we tend to do the thing the same way all the time. So you'll learn your chords like from the beginning through to the end, which means to say that the chords at the beginning get lots of practice and the chords at the end don't get many. Now, that's obviously not the best way to practice. You want to be able to sort of jumble them up a bit. And one of the best systems I've come across is to get a piece of paper and just rip it up into little bits, and on each little bit of paper write the name of a chord. And then just put those little bits of paper into a box or a hat or something like that and draw them out at random. And if you can play them, then put the piece of paper to one side, and if you can't, you go and revise it from the book, really learn the shape and the name and all the rest of it, and put the piece of paper back into the box or the hat, and keep going until all the paper is gone, which means to say the ones that you have to revise you're going to see more than once. Okay, that's a very good sort of system for practice. Now, the other way of doing this is you could create little chord progressions with similar chord patterns from the book. So you could sort of link all the majors together if you want, or link all the minors together. That musically wouldn't sound so good, but that's not really what we're doing it for at the moment. We're trying to get it so that we can get a change from, say, A to a D chord. So we're just looking for the shortcuts, etc. Okay. One of the systems I mentioned about learning the chords from the preliminary grade is to try to engage all your senses, get the chord shape down, look at which fingers you're using, really sort of feel which fingers are being used, what they look like, and what they sound like, what the name of the chord is, because that's also an important point. And once you've done that, take your hand off the guitar, put your hand on your knee, and then put it back on the guitar again. Because that sort of action actually makes you form up the chord. And if you do that with each of the chords when you're learning them, it means that when you get to playing from, say, like an E chord to a D, you're actually already good at forming up the shapes. One other point is when you're learning a chord shape, try to use the fingers in the same order each time, because it works as a triggering mechanism to the mind. So if you're going to play a D chord, let's say, if you put your second finger on first on string 1 and then add the rest of the fingers, it sort of triggers your memory into a sort of like a logical build-up of fingers. Because often what happens with chords like D is people put their fingers on and shuffle around with them and mess around a bit. And of course what actually is happening is you're teaching yourself to do a little dance with your fingers. So you actually learn that. You'll learn all your mistakes as well. So this is why it's so important to, when you're practicing, to do things slowly, in sections, and methodically, and then gradually sort of build the information up like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, this is what we were talking about with the scales. Right. Okay. So with regard to the chords, that gives us all the chords. As I say, if you've done the preliminary grade already, a lot of those chords are familiar to you. So next section, rhythm playing. I'm going to play through each of these patterns for you. One of the additional things that are in the grade is we've got dynamics, which weren't in the previous grade. We've got the repeats, so we need to follow the dynamics. They're very important, and we need to get the repeat signs in. We also need to make sure, we need to be fairly accurate with the chords, but we need to make sure that the rhythm pattern's good. So here's a little point here. If you have a problem getting from one chord to another as a regular problem, and there's like a hesitation, that actually means that you're not playing in 4/4 time. If you had a drummer with you, you might be playing something like 5/4 or something, because if you're doing 4 strums and then adding another beat to change, that's another beat in the bar. Okay? If you really have that problem, the best thing to do is perhaps do 3 strums in the bar and allow a beat in order to change. Okay? So here's pattern number 1, marked as slow ballad. Okay, so with this first one, there was a soft pattern, a soft marking at the beginning, P. And when we got to the D major 7 chord and the D at the end of the first section, it started to get louder. That's what that sort of hair grip type thing is, that's sort of opening out at the end. Then you go back and do the repeat, and obviously go back to being soft. And then when you come through to the last 4 bars, the A is marked loud. So we played it louder. And then the last 2 bars of A, we gradually got quieter. Good. Here's number 2. Notice I sort of exaggerated the loud and the soft, which I think is a very good idea. If you're doing an exam, make sure the examiner knows that you are actually playing loud and soft. Don't make a sort of subtle change, really make it exaggerated. I might do this as a slightly simpler pattern this time. So on that one, I was doing that pattern, which allowed me a beat in order to change. Okay, at the bottom of the page, there's another series of chords, and this is how you would see them in the exam, actually. There are no lines behind them. And this is marked sort of slow and relaxed. So we'll try and make this sort of dynamic. I might sort of slow up near the end to give it a feeling of it being sort of complete, as well as if it's sort of finishing. So. Okay, all right. There's some descriptions about the dynamics in the book on page 16 and 17. Just really, as I said to you, try to make sure that you exaggerate a little in order for the examiner to know that you really have attempted the dynamics. It's very important to make sure you get the dynamics in these grades because of the way that the markings system works. So you want the accuracy of the chords, of course, and you want the pattern to work as a 4/4 pattern. You want to be able to spot the repeat marks, and you need the dynamics. So they're the main sort of elements. Okay, this next section, section 4, is on lead playing. I'm going to play some lead as an example, and then allow the pattern to run for you so you can do your own improvising. I'm not going to show you any patterns as such to play. I'll give you some ideas, but I want you to sort of develop them yourself. In grade 1, examiners aren't expecting what we call specialist techniques. We're not expecting hammers and pull-offs and slides and string bending and everything. But you'll probably find that you might like to use some of those ideas because it does develop your phrasing, which, of course, is obviously very important because it just makes your guitar playing sound so much better. If we just have a look at some of these ideas in the pentatonic minor scale for the time being, a solo for grade 1, the sort of phrases. Would be perfectly adequate. Okay, we don't necessarily have to slide, but if you do, then that sounds quite nice. Okay, there's a bit of vibrato in there. I mean, you may have picked up some of these techniques already by working solos by other people, but just to go through a couple of the probably easier ones, the hammer-on, you play a note and then you hit the next note you want with your left-hand finger. And the opposite of that is a pull-off. So imagine you've got your finger on the 7th fret on string 4, the D string, and as you leave the string, you pluck it with your finger. So that's with your left hand, 3rd finger. And we've got our first finger already there to give us the next note that we want. So that's a hammer and a pull-off. You put the two together, it's a trill. Sort of a bit Hendrixy there, isn't it? Okay, nice little touch. And then obviously string bending, but as I say, with string bending, we're not expecting that, and I won't cover that really in this grade. We'll probably be grade 2 before we start looking at that. Good. So some of the ways that you can develop your playing: make sure that when you play, it sounds like you're talking through the guitar, because really that's all melodies are. It's an expression of the language using notes, and we don't have to play one note and then move on. We can actually repeat notes. That sounds quite nice. Go up a scale a bit, and perhaps down a note, because that sounds more like a phrase and not like a scale. Don't start in the bass. This is my personal advice to you. If you start at the bottom of the scale at the beginning of a solo, it sort of makes it certainly look like you're not comfortable enough with the scale just to drop in anywhere. So if you really are unsure, start at the thinnest part of the guitar, the thinnest string. Start on string 1 and come down. That's as easy to remember as going up, and it doesn't look to the examiner like you don't know where you don't know the scale well enough just to sort of drop in the middle. Okay, if you're asked to do the scales with open strings, like the E natural minor or the G pentatonic major or whatever, make use of the open strings for the E blues. And in the blues scale, be careful of that sharp 4 flat 5 note. It's only a passing note, so don't stay on it. Okay, makes it sound very bluesy, but don't just play and expect that to work. I mean, the tunes where you do get that blue note appear, one of the classic ones that I can think of is the Pink Panther. The chords change to facilitate that note. So don't just put that in without resolving it. Okay? Sort of thing, sort of slide through it, etc. So here are the patterns. Okay, with this one, this is E natural minor. Okay, we can just run through the scale to start with. Quite a good idea when you're playing lead, not just to start on the bottom of the scale, start at the top. In an exam situation, when you see candidates actually playing from the bottom of the scale, it's almost as if they're not really confident enough with the scale just to start anywhere. So I would get some good phrases that work from the top or the middle of the scale. Okay. Now there's a nice room for sort of sliding in this one. And this is on string 4, so just going from the open to the second and then sliding to 4. And then again, if you repeat some notes, sounds good. And then take little phrases and repeat them. And then perhaps the last time, turn the phrase around. This makes it sound very melodic. So here we go, let's do that little phrase again. From the top of the scale, we're going down, just down the scale to the open second string. One more time. And then turn it upside down. That sounds a nice little melodic phrase. Now, the other thing is that the root note, so the bottom note of the scale, the top note of the scale, and in this case, the second fret of the 4th string, are all the E notes. So if you're at a loss of which note to finish your phrase on, that's your safest bet. Okay, with this one, this is E natural minor. Okay, we can just run through the scale to start with. Quite a good idea when you're playing lead, not just to start on the bottom of the scale, start at the top. In an exam situation, when you see candidates actually playing from the bottom of the scale, it's almost as if they're not really confident enough of the scale just to start anywhere. So I would get some good phrases that work from the top or the middle of the scale. Okay. Now there's a nice room for sort of sliding in this one. And this is on string 4, so just going from the open to the second and then sliding to 4. And then again, if you repeat some notes, sounds good. And then take little phrases and repeat them. And then perhaps the last time, turn the phrase around. This makes it sound very melodic. So here we go, let's do that little phrase again. From the top of the scale, we're going down, just down the scale to the open second string. One more time. And then turn it upside down. That sounds a nice little melodic phrase. Now, the other thing is that the root note, so the bottom note of the scale, the top note of the scale, and in this case, the second fret of the 4th string are all the E notes. So if you're at a loss of which note to finish your phrase on, that's your safest bet. Okay, this is the E blues scale. Just be careful of the A sharp note and B flat note in this one, which is your sharp 4 flat 5 note. That note has to resolve, so we have to move it either up or down. Okay, and then everything else that we've discussed with the other scales and things apply here. But we've got a couple of other nice touches on this one. We can do some string bending if you want to try this. String 2 at the 3rd fret. If we sort of lean on that and then follow it with the open 1st string, that sounds quite nice. And we can do the 2nd fret on string 3 and follow that with the 2nd string open, because it sort of resolves the bend. So even if you don't bend it into correctly, you sort of mean, it actually sounds okay. And in this scale also, the top 2 strings sound great if you play them open. So here we go. And with the blues, it's nice to repeat some phrases. So. And if you do a repeat, if you sort of vary it as you go along, either in the timing or that sounds great as well. So sort of doodle around with that and you'll have a lot of fun with this track, okay? Okay, G pentatonic major. This one's got a lot of nice simple patterns that we can play over it, using sort of ode to 2 and strings 5, 4 and 3. You can do a lot with that, listen. And on the top, a bit like the blues scale, up to the 3rd fret this time. And again, you can do some pull-offs here, they sound nice. So from the 3rd fret of string 1, now it's quite interesting this, because those little patterns you get a lot in rock and roll, and obviously rock music, where the music's basically grouped in 2s. If you think of the quavers or 8th notes. But you're playing in groups of 3 as quavers, so you get like a cross rhythm. It sounds really nice. So here we go. It's a bit like the old Chuck Berry riffs where you slide into double stopping.
mess around with that. And again, remember just to tap your foot when you're playing. Now another little trick which is quite good when you're practicing, if you cover the strings over and just play some sort of interesting rhythm with your plectrum, just see what comes out, you know. It's like you're playing percussion really, and then fit notes to it. You can come up with some very nice ideas like that. You don't have to be sort of zooming up and down the scale. In fact, it's probably a good idea not to do that actually, because it tends to sound a little bit mechanical. So, you know, listen to what the backing's doing, and then just sort of create some patterns with that. Okay, good. Okay, with this one, this is A major. This is a tricky scale, really. But if you stick to what we've said previously, where we're just working on the little phrases, and you work with the notes perhaps on just one string at a time. And if you can get a good tune out of that, that's on string 4. Go on to string 3. And then you can sort of develop from that. Good to slide on this one. That's it. Okay, so with this one, this is a nice scale to play over, and it's quite common in rock music. So all the tricks of the bends and the hammers, if you want to put them in, again, they're not expected for grade 1, but if you feel that you can incorporate them musically into your playing, then do. Remember what I said about talking through your guitar, right? Try to say something. And again, if you know where your root notes are, where your A notes are, if you get stuck, you can always get back onto that note to resolve. But a pentatonic scale is pretty safe anyway, more or less. Because all those notes are usable. Do what I was suggesting about the rhythmic sort of thing, just to give you a practice, get some interesting rhythmic ideas, and then you sort of take those rhythm patterns it's good practice for your plectrum as well when you're doing that, and then just sort of incorporate that into the way that you would normally play. One on the string bend there. Okay. Okay, we're on section 5 now, the spoken tests.
Now, this is one area where a lot of guitarists fall flat on their face because they don't know the names of the notes on the fretboard. You must learn the fretboard. Now, you will only be asked notes that actually feature in the scales. So you could learn the notes of the scales if you wished. I think you should learn the fretboard because it has obviously more applications. So how do I do it? Well, I would teach it as a series of mnemonics, because one of the sort of peculiar things that we do when we try to learn the fretboard, and I see this so often when I do exams, you ask somebody, what's the name of the note at the 8th fret on the B string? They find the B string and they start then counting up from the open string. And it takes ages, and eventually they get up there, and of course by the time they get there, they've got it wrong anyway. Now, that's not normally how we sort of navigate. Forgetting about guitar for a moment. I mean, if you moved to a new place, a new location, you would learn things by locating other areas. For instance, say you've got your new house and you knew where the town was and say the clock tower or something like that, and then you found a really good cafe or something, I don't know. You'd tell somebody where that place was by referring to where it was near. Like, for instance, the cafe, it's right near the clock tower, and you go down the road and it's second on the left. You don't say, it's out of my front door, 300 yards, half a mile, and then you turn left, and then you don't do that. But that's what we do when we're sort of working out guitar notes on the guitar, by going right from the bottom of the guitar string. So what I would suggest is learn locations, like the notes at the 3rd fret, notes at the 5th fret, notes at the 7th, notes at the 10th maybe, and obviously the notes at the 12th are the same as the open strings. So we've got some crazy mnemonics for you. Here's the first one. We did this before, but elephants and donkeys grow big ears. So from the thickest string to the thinnest on all of these mnemonics, elephants and donkeys grow big ears. So that's E-A-D, G-B-E. Then at the 3rd fret, we have Gordon caught fish. So G, C, F. But Billy didn't go. But Billy stands for B flat, because the flat sign looks like a B. So but Billy didn't go. At the 5th fret, Auntie Doris gets caught eating apples. Auntie Doris gets caught eating apples. So those notes are A, D, G, C, E, A. Okay? Now for probably the craziest one of the lot. This is at the 7th fret. It's the bass string, spell the word bead, B-E-A-D, and then it's F sharp, B. And one of my pupils came out with, beware, every animal dies from sharp bananas. It does work, this, so bear with me. Okay, and then for the 10th fret, from the bass string, don't get caught feeding any dinosaurs. Don't get caught feeding any dinosaurs. Now, once we've got all those notes learnt, I would suggest if you type these up on a computer, make them nice and big and bold, print them out and stick them on your wall. Then what we're going to do, if I was to say what's the name of the 8th note, the note on the 8th fret of the B string, we go up to the B string and think, well, actually, I know that the 7th fret is beware, every animal dies from sharp. So the next note up from F sharp is G. That's the answer. So a much more direct way of working them out. Now, occasionally people say, well, if you've got a note like F sharp, is that G flat or is it F sharp? Because it's the same note in the book. Well, these terms are called enharmonics. It's the enharmonic of F sharp is G flat. At this point, it doesn't matter because we're just taking notes in isolation. We're not referring to notes within a scale or anything like that, okay, within a key. It certainly does matter which one they are when you're talking about keys, talking about notes within chords, etc., but it doesn't matter at the moment with the fretboard knowledge. So either one of those answers would be fine. But notice there is no B sharp, there is no E sharp, there is no C flat, and there is no F flat at the moment. There will be later, but that's all to do with theory, so we're not to trouble ourselves with that. Good. And then some of the other questions that you might get in the spoken tests are about the knowledge of the instrument. So if we go through the sections that are written in the book, basic ways in which tone can be varied, such as changing the picking hand position. So obviously if you play an acoustic guitar, that's the only way of changing the tone, really. Well, one of the only ways, where you actually play the string. So if you're playing near the bridge, it's a very bright sound, whereas near the neck, it's a warm sound. But of course, we can also change the pickup. So we get the front pickup is warmer than the back pickup. We can also change the tone setting. And we can also change by how we're using our pick and all sorts of things. So you only need a couple of examples. So changing the pickup, changing where you're striking the strings. Then the function of the machine heads, what do they do? You just have to explain how the machine head works and how you tune a string up with it. So when you turn the peg, it tightens the string, which increases the pitch, etc. And then some of the common guitar terms like action. This is the distance between the strings and the fretboard. So when somebody says, I've got a low action on my guitar, which I have, the strings are near the fretboard, which makes it nice and easy to play it. But if you have a higher action, you get a better tone. So some players will have a higher action. And certain styles of guitar playing, like bottleneck, you don't need to have a low action for that at all. And then obviously got marker dots on the guitar, that's listed in the book. So the dots or blocks inlaid in the front, side, etc. of the fingerboard to help you position the notes. And they're normally on the odd numbers. Sometimes, not often on 1, but occasionally on 1, 3, 5, 7, then 9, then double dots on 12. Now, that's quite useful because later on, when we work out the notes on the bass strings, that tends to be where the white notes of the piano are. Right, we're on the homeward stretch now. The oral assessments, section 6. You will definitely get the repetition of rhythms, which is on page 23. If you look at these, just a 2-bar measure with crotchets and quavers. So if I just run through these, I'll play them on the guitar. In the exam, you can clap them back or tap them or play them on the string, it doesn't matter. So that's the first one, okay? It's always a good idea to sort of tap it out or certainly become familiar with, crotchets sound like the word tea and quavers sound like the word coffee. So like the next one you'd get. So that's going tea, coffee, tea. The next one. That's number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Okay, Repetition of melodic phrases. Now, some people have problems with this. This is to sort of test your ability to hear and work things out. And obviously, this was traditionally how guitarists would work out some things. You know, Clapton, Hendrix, Beck, Jimmy Page, whatever. They would have sat down with their favourite recordings of guitarists and sat there and worked out what somebody had done by slowing the record down. What happens for us is that we are told what scale the melody is taken from, and then the examiner will play it, probably coming from the root note, or either at the bottom of the scale or the top of the scale. And there'll be crotchets and quavers within this. So let me just play the E natural minor scale pattern. Do it again. Trick here is to hum it. Because you can always refer back to the memory of how the tune went. Because it's amazing how quickly you will forget it if you just only store it as a memory of what the guitar sounded like. Okay, the next one, the A pentatonic minor scale. The A major scale. And then finally, the G pentatonic major scale. Notice how virtually all of these are scales. They're still going either up or down a scale. There may be the odd occasion where there is a note repeated. Now, I would hazard a guess and say that because the ones in the handbook are virtually along the same lines, all of them, that's quite likely what you're going to get in the exam. All right, so work some stuff out for yourself as well. Get maybe another guitarist or your teacher to test you. Right, keeping time. Now this one, all you've got to do is beat 4 beats in the bar with an accent on the first beat in the bar after the examiner has played the tune. Okay? So again, 3, 4. And the second exercise in the book. And then we've got the pitch test. Right, so we have 2 notes which are we refer to as an interval. We have A to B, which is a major second. I just think of that as frere jacques. So when you hear, hopefully it makes you think of the tune. So frere jacques for a major second. A to C sharp is a major third, which sounds like while shepherds watch their flocks. A to D, perfect fourth, away in a manger. And then finally a perfect fifth. I always think of it as, but you can think of it as Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Okay. So what we've got there, these are like little triggering mechanisms. So when you hear the 2 notes, you think of the tune, and then hopefully you will then think of the interval. So the way to do it is frere jacques is actually 2 words, so that's a major second. While shepherds watch their flocks, 3 wise men in the story, so that's a third. Away in a manger has got 4 words in the title, so that's a fourth. And then, depending on how you want to look at it, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's got, if you drew a star, you'd have 5 points on a star. If you think of the last tune, which I think is called The Last Post, well, where I am, the last post is around about 5:30 or 5 o'clock, so that's a fifth. Okay. And then the very last question is the harmony test. And what the examiner will do is he'll play a set of chords, a bit like happened in the preliminary grade. They're either majors, minors, dominant sevenths, or major sevenths. So here's the majors. Right, majors sound happy. Here's minors. So they sound sort of sadder, okay? And then sevens sound bluesy. You right? So you got the A's, A7, and then the A major sevens sound jazzy or slightly sort of funky. Okay? So if I play them as another, you there? See, very jazzy. Okay. So that's what I would do. I'd go on the sort of feeling of the sound. You could practice them through because they're obviously going to be A's and D's of different types. Great. Okay. Well, I hope that's been of good for you, been useful for you to work along with. Best of luck when you do the exam grade. Obviously, there are a number of grades to follow, and it's a fabulous way to develop your guitar playing because it keeps you so focused. And obviously the most important thing about guitar playing is to enjoy playing. So have a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll see you when we do the grade 2 exam. And the very final information, if you want to get in contact with me, you can visit my website on www.vichyland, which is vichyland.com. You can get to me via email on that. You can also connect to the RGT website through there, and also vice versa. I always look forward to receiving your comments about the CDs and books, because obviously I'm working on things like this all the time, and it helps me sort of develop new ideas and new ways of teaching. So thanks very much, and I'll speak to you again. Bye.